Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this edition of the Valley View. And joining me this week is Delana Beaton, and we're going to talk about homeless. We talked about this about a year ago, and I'd kind of like to do an update about what's gone on since then, where are we now, and maybe what people can do. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ken. I'm glad to be here again. As people may have read or heard on the news, Oregon is consistently now among the 3 or 4 states with the highest rates of homelessness. Various conjecture as to why that might be or is, but it's a fact. And Salem is the county, and Polk, Marion Polk, as a paired counties where have the highest rate within the state of Oregon. So we have a great need for housing and supportive services for our homeless population.
Well, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that we're like 3rd or 4th. We're also like 3rd or 4th highest in unemployment,
Yes.
which is probably
Might be a connection
there
there.
might be a connection there. I mean, Oregon has historically always been high in unemployment, but it's like we don't recover as fast a lot of times from recessions or, you know, dips in the economy. And so it's leading to a lot of people then losing their homes or wherever they're renting, and then they're forced into their cars or out in the streets, basically.
Mm-hmm. One of the characteristics currently of our homeless population is the high percentage of homeless people who are, we call them the new homeless. They've never needed this kind of services before. But they're one layoff or one car breakdown from being evicted. So we have a lot of people who are new to this kind of need.
And sometimes don't know how to go about getting help.
To access help. Marion Polk Food Share staff make similar comments about the people seeking food boxes and food relief now. You know, they haven't grown up that way. They haven't done that.
They've always had food. They've never had to worry about those sorts of things.
That's right.
And quite often, I would imagine, I'm not for sure, but is it slightly older population, people that are maybe in their late 40s, 50s, that are, that would be a big change for them. You know, if they've gone through life with jobs and kind of a stable home life, and then all of a sudden it's not stable.
You know, I don't personally have that data. If there's been a demographic shift to older folks. I did recently hear one of our local shelter management people comment that the average age of the homeless person in Marion County is 9.
9.
Yeah, so it's
So
our
it's a kid.
kids. It's our kids.
Yeah. And 9. So it's quite often the parents, but they've got like 2, 3 kids or whatever, and so the average age is 9. That is not a healthy situation.
No, it's not.
So what is going on currently to help this problem along? Do we have we don't have enough beds for all these
We're
people.
woefully short of shelter beds for all parts of the demographic, but specifically, particularly, we are incredibly short of housing, sheltering housing for families, parents and their minor children, and for teens.
And teens has kind of been an ongoing problem for a little while now.
It has. Teens were sheltered for many years here in Salem at a Northwest Community Services program called HOST. And HOST still exists, and they are still able to give some care and services to some teens. If someone wanted to contact Northwest Human Services, asked to speak to Verena Wessel. Verena is the director there, and with almost no resources is doing an incredible job. But last year, they HOST across the nation lost most or all of their funding, which was from the federal government. The HOST program nationally was one of the victims of the Great Compromise to the sequester to keep the government going.
So now we have even more people on the streets.
Right. More kids.
More kids out on the street. And you were mentioning Marion Polk Food Share, so there's also a hunger problem then going on, which
Hunger-
makes it more difficult for them. If they're homeless, they probably don't, makes it difficult for them to go to school. And
Yes.
if they do go to school, are they getting fed through programs at school, or have those been cut as well?
No, the free and reduced lunch program, which may include breakfast before school also, those still exist. The problem is things like not having a home address anymore, not having a phone where calls could be returned, or teachers or schools can even reach the parent during the day. We've got kids bathing, in the sinks at McDonald's kind of thing. I mean, they don't have homes, so.
So has the problem, okay, in the last year, has the problem gotten worse, or has it been steady?
I could guess, but I won't, because I don't have any data on the exact numbers of people. But what did happen is the resources for housing homeless teens and families in Salem, Oregon, reduced last year. In our earlier show, we touched lightly on it, and I'll just summarize quickly. We lost 10 sheltering units for families at Salvation Army.
Right.
We lost sheltering units for 14 families when Salem Outreach Shelter closed just a year ago in November of 2013. Those have not been replaced.
So we're still short.
We were short then. When Salem Outreach Shelter closed, they had a waiting list of 30 families needing shelter that just were never rotated in. It didn't happen. The only standing true shelter for families today in Salem is St. Francis Shelter, and they historically housed 10 families at a time, and great effort on their part. They have increased that to 13. So there's our only increase in sheltering units for families, and we're very grateful to St. Francis Shelter. Getting ready for this program, I contacted Kim Lemon, their director, and she talks about the great number of families they turn away almost daily. They maintain their waiting list of 30, so just have a huge need for families, especially for two-parent families, which is what we'd all like to see happen, is the whole family stay intact. Samanka House, the shelter for women, part of Union Gospel Mission, they will house women, their minor daughters, and their minor sons aged 12 and under. And their men's shelter will take men 18 and over. So you see the gap. It's our males between 13 and 17. They don't have anywhere to go within the Union Gospel structure. Salvation Army has gone exclusively to single men and single women, no families.
So this has been an ongoing problem for over a year.
At least.
And we've had some increase in some areas, but we're still lacking. And is the city or the county doing anything about this problem?
Let's see. I'm not aware of any city or county programs for housing homeless people.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is that the mayor did come to that homeless forum you had last year.
She did.
So what positive steps have we seen in that regard since then?
The ones of which I'm aware are in the private area. Catholic Community Services has purchased from the city apartment units. They're coming in about 85% already occupied and rented, but they will have some. And of course, there will be turnover. They plan to use that new housing capacity largely to house the chronically mentally ill, perhaps help manage their meds, certainly keep them warm and sheltered. So that's the piece of the homeless problem that Catholic Community Services will be addressing. And that's great. I mean, we clearly need that. We need all of it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and I live kind of downtown, and I know of about 5 houses that are vacant, that have been vacant for probably, well, 3 of them I know have been over a year.
Yes.
And one's been like well over 2 years. And with nobody living in them, there's no maintenance going on.
Right.
And so it would seem like the city should do something to try to, stabilize that situation so that we don't lose more housing stock. Because pretty soon, I know that one that's like 2 years old was not in good condition to start with. So, I mean, I wonder at what point is that thing just going to become a real hazard? And so, it bothers me that I see this housing stock that's being unused, and we have a large homeless population.
Yeah, it's a disconnect, isn't it?
Yes.
And I have trouble comprehending that also. We have a large inventory of what is called in the homeless workers derelict housing. And as you say, no one's using it, it's deteriorating, rodents move in, one thing and another. There are some cities in the country where real efforts have been taken, largely working with the banks to see if some or many of those derelict houses can be put to good use to house the homeless. There are a couple of cities with guerrilla actions where the homeless
Just squat.
just move into the homes.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been intensive study of that or collection of data, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that in many cases they have improved the property. They've cleaned it up, they've gotten rid of the trash, the garbage,
Right.
And it's a problem in that kind of work to even get power and water turned on.
Because there's no clear title for one thing.
That's right. And you don't have a history of, like, if you wanted to open a new PGE account, they're going to review your PGE history and have you paid your bills, that
Right.
kind of thing. If you can't document that, it's problematic that you're going to get power turned on. So there are a lot of blocks, but even getting them out of the elements,
Would be a big
would
help.
be a big help.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I remember a few weeks ago there was a woman, and I have no idea how old she was, I would say in her 40s, that was just sitting on the bridge there at 17th between Center and
Yes.
Chemeketa
Okay.
for the longest time. And I went over and talked to her, and she just had no place to go.
There you go. Exactly.
And so I pointed out where some of those vacants were, that she could at least sit on the porch because it
Out
was
of the rain.
cold and it was rainy.
Yeah.
But I mean, even that,
Yeah.
it just doesn't seem like enough that
No.
is being done. And I think the situation is such that we really need to start concentrating on getting that done. They'll be sitting there talking about building a new police headquarters, new bridge over the Willamette, but we have all these people that don't even have shelter. We have families without shelter. Seems like their priorities are a little askew.
Well, I can't judge that, and I'm sure that for every dollar within the city's budget, there are many ideas about how that dollar could be spent. But just in terms of alleviating human suffering, I would hope we could all work together, the private entities and the governmental entities, to make this a true priority. Shelter for our citizens.
Yeah. How about other cities here in Oregon, like Portland or Eugene or Albany? Are they doing anything about their homeless situation, or is this one that's kind of spread out throughout the state?
Well, I think both are true. It's definitely a statewide problem, but I think it's more severe, at least numerically, more numbers up and down the I-5 corridor. Here's what Portland, that I know of, they may be doing other things which I don't know, but there's a place in Portland near the airport called Dignity Village. And the homeless have, with approval, have built, and we could call it a tent city. They've built platforms and.
So they're not sitting in the mud.
Right, because it's on asphalt, the piece of land they were allowed to use. Marginal land is an understatement. Wedged between a freeway and the runways, kind of thing. Not on the runway, certainly.
But close, but it's
But-
noisy then.
It's very noisy, I can only imagine. But they are self-governing and have been for a few years. Minimal minimal needs for police response. You know, people take food. Some of them are employed, but they don't make a living wage, so they can't rent their own place. Some have been
Right.
there for a long time. Also, in the Goose Hollow area of Portland, there are two large churches that have for a long time cooperated. One of them is called the Night Church, and one's the Day Church. The Night Church serves dinner, a hot meal, and has, you know, bedding and cots and pillows and blankets and all of that, to shelter the homeless overnight. And then I'm not really clear whether the Night Church does breakfast also, but it's at 8 o'clock. They all walk a block or block and a half to the Day Church, where they're given some case management, attempt to have staff help them address their blocks, what's blocking them from being rehoused, given transportation to appointments, that kind of thing, and fed lunch, of course, and a room for the children to play. So it's the Day Church and the Night Church, and they shift every 12 hours. And we could probably do that, but it doesn't have to just be the churches that are already bearing
Right.
the load. There must be other spaces that are large and flat and have restrooms available that we could use.
Yeah, and I remember when I lived in Sacramento, there was a mustard seed school that was located near the homeless shelters downtown. So the kids would at least be in the same school. They wouldn't have to be
Right.
bouncing around. And like the teachers there were used to kids that were homeless. They, you know, understood their needs a lot better than you would in a regular classroom. And I thought it was very successful. And I think one of the Catholic groups of nuns helped staff it. They weren't the only ones, but they helped staff it so that there was some support there from the churches, but it wasn't just solely from the
Right.
churches.
In Salem Kaiser Schools, well, after I retired, I unintentionally became the interim director of Salem Outreach Shelter, the shelter housing homeless families. And I did that twice, 2 stints of that. And I was grateful and impressed that the Salem Kaiser Schools, they sent the little buses, and they picked up the kids from us each morning and took them to the school they had been attending.
Oh, okay.
So they had that continuity with teachers and students, you know, that they had
Right.
known and been with. So
They
that
had
was
something of a support system.
That's right. I love your mustard school idea, but I also am grateful to the public schools here for that effort they made to keep kids where they had been.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're homeless and you're living downtown and you're busing the kids out to schools, then it becomes a problem if, say, they get sick at school,
Very much so.
and just, you know, I know as a parent, I would be worried about my kids, you know,
Yes.
and not having them close by at least, you know, would be a kind of a
Yes.
concern.
A concern. I'm sure it is.
And so, I mean, so what can the local community do to help this situation? What are some positive things that people can be doing?
Well, there are a lot of those. I am very encouraged under the leadership of a woman named Audrey Shackle, St. Mark's Lutheran Church and their next door church, they call them the First Congregational, both of course on Marion Street Northeast, near the intersection of Marion and Winter. Those two churches have cooperated. They've now had 2 meetings. They have formed what they call the Coalition on Homelessness. And they're certainly inviting other churches to join them. Salem Police Department is a part of this coalition. Community Action Agency, Northwest Human Services, Interfaith Hospitality Network, St. Francis. It really is a coalition of people working on this problem. And I've attended the meetings. It's a high energy focused group. And I'm impressed that they're forming, and I'm hoping others will join them. You could connect either by calling me or calling St. Mark's Lutheran Church, asking when the next meeting will be. It's open. They're meeting at 7 p.m. on Mondays, but not every Monday, just 1 or 2 Mondays a month. So that would be one way to connect with newly developing efforts to address this problem. Any of the existing shelters would appreciate donations. Marion Polk Food Share, of course, always needs and receives food donations, which they then distribute to all of these places with so many people in need. Those are some of the things one could do. One could take your suggestion of somehow organizing a structured way to use and access these derelict houses. And I would think a bank would be a place to go, or the city. Those are some of the kinds of things. Yesterday, 3 of us went to Eugene to visit their 3 establishments to address the needs of the homeless. One they call Opportunity Vision, and the city of Eugene a year and a half ago now, took the lead in organizing this. And it's what they call a micro housing community, little tiny houses, 8 by 10, 10 by 10, 8 by 12. We had a delightful tour from one of the residents. Eyes twinkled. He said, well, I'm just an old man and I'm alone now, so I have one of the little ones. I have 8 by 8, 64 feet. And they're painted pretty colors, and it looked kind of nice, but it got less nice as we talked to more people. The little units have no water and no power, so they're very, very cold. And the people were just freezing. I shook hands with many of them. Their hands were like ice. So for me, I'm not sure that's the answer.
I think during the forum, you had a speaker, and they were basically saying we can't build our way out of the problem.
That's right. That's right.
And I mean, those are kind of a solution, but
yeah.
64 square feet is awfully small.
It's
Even
little.
100 square feet is awfully small.
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow you quite often space to cook. And as you're saying,
they
you don't
don't
have
cook.
water.
They
You
don't
don't have
water
any
or
kind
power.
of toilet facilities usually in those.
They had, I saw 2 porta potties there, and their cooking center was an outdoor space with tarps over it, and a gentleman was starting to cook. Looked like a big pot of chili or something like that. So I was glad to see that, but that was outside on propane. You know, it's a dilemma. Their second location we went to is called Community Supported Shelters. Lovely staff, totally volunteer. Both of these places are self-governing. The residents have regular meetings. They elect their chair people. They handle all. They have each of those establishments. The residents have evicted some people who were threatening or disruptive for whatever reason. So they're self-governing and reportedly doing a very good job. The third place was a new concept for me. It's called ESS, which stands for Eugene Safe Stops. And they have 2 functioning, and 1 will be opening in a week. And one of these Eugene Safe Spots is for veterans only. One is for women only, and the other one coming up will be men, with the emphasis on veterans. Salem, at a recent count of the homeless, identified 600 homeless veterans on our streets. So your question to me was what good thing is happening. Yeah. The former Salem Outreach Shelter for homeless families will be reopening almost immediately, it's very, very soon, to house homeless veterans. And there are 15 rooms there, and if they were to double up, that would be 30 people, and that's wonderful, and I couldn't be more happy that someone will be housed there and sheltered. But you compare even 30 to the established need of 600. And we can't think that way and get ourselves so discouraged,
Yeah.
but it isn't going to solve the homeless veteran problem in total.
No. And so I guess going forward, this is kind of like what you work on now.
Yeah.
now that you're retired. You
Yeah,
have time
it
to work
is.
on.
That's true.
And so we need more people involved. We need people to recognize that there's a problem that we need to
Yes.
deal with.
Yes.
And we need to come together as a community to do something about it.
Exactly.
And so I want to remind folks that at the end, during the credits, they'll have your contact information. So if people want to get in touch with you about what they can do to help, that's one way you'll be able to do it. So what can you say to people about making it important for them to get involved?
Well, I really think we're going to have to do this as a community if we want it done. We need to get together in small groups, and then they'll ultimately, hopefully, be in communication with each other. We have the resources in this community. We have the already constructed buildings with restroom facilities and large spaces where people can sleep, and kitchens to prepare food to feed a warm breakfast or dinner. We have the resources. I was gratified last year when, for I believe it was 2 nights, maybe one of the churches then opened later and for another couple of nights, for warming shelters when we were
When
down,
it got really cold.
we were down in 7 degrees. But those were quickly closed. There's some sort of a formula that the emergency managers for the cities and the counties need to use, that takes the average temperature, I don't know if it's per hour or what, for 2 or 3 days. And if that mean or temperature is below 32 degrees, then they'll leave a warming shelter open, but should it rise above? And so we closed our warming shelter when it was still in the 7 to 10 degree range at night.
Yeah.
And when I questioned that, they explained to me this calculation formula that they need to follow. So
Is
we
that a
could
federal
change.
guideline?
I don't know if that's federal or I don't know, so I shouldn't pretend to
Yeah.
know.
Well, I mean, it kind of bothers me because, like, here in Oregon, it rains a lot. And so if you get wet,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be down in
No.
the single digits for you to be cold.
Be
If
very,
you,
very cold. And then we have some wind too, so the wind chill factor, especially after one's clothes are soaked,
right.
it's ugly. I should mention that the newly forming Coalition on Homelessness, centered again at St. Mark's Lutheran and First Congregational Churches, then their first meeting they established 2 goals, a short-term goal of setting up prepared warming shelters, so they're ready to go if we hit a real icy spell again.
Okay.
And then their second goal, goal 2, is to work together to establish more sheltering units, more bed nights.
Well, Delina, I want to thank you for coming in and talking
Thank
about
you.
this situation, and hopefully we'll get more people involved with this, because it
Good.
is an important issue.
Thank you so much, Ken.
And I want to thank you all for watching Valley View, and come back next time.